While I buried my 9-year-old alone, my family drank champagne across town. Then MOM messaged, "Stop being dramatic. This is urgent." She meant my dead son's $850,000 trust fund. The rain had been falling since dawn, a slow, persistent drizzle that blurred the outlines of gravestones and made the ground soft beneath Emily Foster's shoes. She stood alone beneath a black umbrella, its edge trembling slightly in the cold September wind, and watched as the small white casket was lowered into the earth. Her grip tightened around the bouquet of calla lilies in her hand, the petals already bruised by the moisture in the air. Not a single familiar voice echoed across the cemetery. No arms wrapped around her shoulders. No shared silence of mourning. Just the dull sound of earth striking wood, and the whisper of wind threading through the trees. Noah had been 9 years old. A light in her life, curious and gentle, with a laugh that still rang in her ears like a cruel echo. He had died only 4 days ago, in what the paramedics had called a tragic accident. One moment he had been running down the hallway after dinner, barefoot and giggling as he tried to escape bath time, and the next, Emily could barely bring herself to remember. There had been water. A sharp cry. Then silence. The hospital lights had been too bright, the doctors too calm, their words too final. A head injury. Severe. Irreversible. She had sat by his bed until the machine stopped. The service had been brief. She hadn't wanted anything elaborate, Noah would not have wanted that. Still, she had expected someone to show. A neighbor. A friend. Her family. But the seats beneath the funeral tent had remained empty. It was as if her grief was something contagious, something to be avoided. She had left voicemails, sent messages, begged for someone to come. No one had. No explanations. No apologies. Only silence. She took a slow breath and stepped forward, her heels sinking into the damp grass, and dropped the lilies onto the casket. The white petals vanished against the pale wood like snowflakes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "You deserved more than this." The cemetery was quiet, save for the hum of distant traffic and the occasional cry of a crow. Emily stood there for a long while, letting the rain soak into her coat, her dress, her hair. She felt empty. Drained. As if the storm had carved out something vital inside her and left nothing in its place. She had buried her only child, and she had done it alone. Eventually, the groundskeeper approached with a gentle nod, waiting a few paces back. Emily took the cue. She turned away from the grave and began walking slowly back toward the parking lot. Her shoes were muddy. Her fingers numb. Her chest ached with a sorrow that had no language. Her car, an old silver sedan with a cracked rearview mirror, sat beneath a flickering street lamp. She opened the door and slid into the driver's seat, her hands trembling as she tried to start the engine. The radio crackled to life, mid-commercial, and she turned it off immediately. The silence inside the car was suffocating, but she could not bear the sound of strangers pretending everything was normal. She reached into her coat pocket for her phone, needing, she did not even know what. A distraction. A message. A reminder that the world still spun. The screen lit up with a single notification. A text from her mother. Her stomach tightened. Her thumb hovered over the message for a moment before she tapped it open. "Stop being dramatic. This is urgent." Emily stared at the words, uncomprehending. The text didn't make sense. Dramatic? Her son was dead. She was alone in a cemetery parking lot, drenched to the bone and barely holding herself together. How could anything else matter right now? Then another message came through. "We need to talk about Noah's trust fund." The bank called. Emily's vision blurred. Her first instinct was that she had misread it. Her brain, addled by grief and exhaustion, must have twisted the words. But no, the text remained there, stark and cruel. Trust fund? Her fingers moved to reply, then stopped. Her heart pounded. She had not spoken of the trust fund to anyone in years, not since the will had been read, not since the lawyer had explained the conditions after Jared died. Noah's father had set it up after a series of successful tech ventures, putting aside $850,000 for his son. The money was to be untouched until Noah turned 25, except in the event of his death. In that case, it would fall under Emily's management, as the sole surviving parent. She had told no one. Not her mother. Not her sister. Not even her closest friends. It had felt too private. Too painful. A backup plan she hoped never to use. Now, with Noah gone, and her grief still raw, the thought of that money felt like an insult. A cruel consolation prize. Yet here was her mother, messaging her, not to offer condolences, or comfort, or even an apology for missing the funeral, but to talk about money. She stared at the phone, her fingers shaking with a rage that had no outlet. Her hand moved to toss it across the seat, then stopped. She locked the screen and threw it back into her purse. Outside, the rain continued to fall, tapping softly against the windshield. She sat there for a long time, staring at the gate of the cemetery through the fogged glass. It had been a lonely funeral. Too lonely. And now, somehow, it felt like something much worse was beginning. She started the car. The engine turned over with a low groan, then caught. She pulled out of the lot slowly, her hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. Behind her, the cemetery faded into the mist. Ahead, the streetlights stretched into the distance like cold stars. She didn't know what her mother meant by urgent. She didn't know how she had found out about the trust fund. But a dark instinct stirred in Emily's gut. Something told her that Noah's death had awakened more than grief. Something told her the worst wasn't over. Emily didn't reply to the text. Not that night, and not the next morning either. She spent the hours after the funeral in a fog, moving through her apartment like a ghost. Noah's room remained untouched. His bed still unmade from the morning of the accident, his backpack slouched against the wall. His favorite stuffed fox lay on the floor, its fabric worn at the edges. She couldn't bring herself to pick it up. Every object screamed his name, and silence hung like a veil in the air, waiting to suffocate her. But Barbara's message burned in the back of her mind. It wasn't just the timing, it was the tone. Cold. Calculated. As if the burial of a child was a footnote to some greater agenda. Emily had tried to give her family the benefit of the doubt. She had told herself there might be a misunderstanding, some miscommunication, some reason for their absence. But now it felt deliberate. Coordinated. She couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was unfolding behind her back. By the time Thursday morning rolled around, Emily was sitting in her living room, still in her funeral dress, staring at her phone with swollen eyes and a hollow expression. Her fingers hovered over her mother's contact, then switched to her bank app. After a moment's hesitation, she logged in. The trust fund wasn't visible through her standard interface, it was held under a separate fiduciary account. She didn't have direct access. Only Jared's lawyer and the managing bank had oversight until now. Still, the fact that her mother mentioned a call from the bank chilled her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a follow-up message from Barbara. Emily. We can't wait any longer. This is a financial matter now, not emotional. Call me. She stood, suddenly feeling like the walls were shrinking around her. The apartment, once warm with laughter and late-night stories and the endless questions of a curious child, now felt like a trap. She needed to breathe. Needed to think. Needed answers. Without showering or changing, she grabbed her keys and left the apartment. The sky outside was gray, still threatening rain, but she walked briskly down the street to a small coffee shop on the corner where she knew the barista, a quiet woman named Lena, would let her sit without questions. She ordered a black coffee, didn't touch it, and opened her email. Her inbox had several unread messages, most of them condolences from coworkers or Noah's school. One stood out. The subject line read, Trust Fund Authorization Inquiry. Her pulse spiked as she opened it. The email came from a bank representative named Colin Desai. It was addressed to her and marked urgent. Dear Ms. Foster. Following up on the voicemail left by our office on Tuesday, we are seeking confirmation regarding a recent inquiry into the disbursement options for Noah Foster's fiduciary account. Please note that any alterations to the current terms require full legal documentation and the account holder's verified consent. If you did not initiate this request, please contact our office immediately at the number below. Her throat tightened. She had never made a request. Had not even touched the account since Jared's death. Someone was using Noah's passing as a key to something she had vowed never to exploit. She scrolled further and saw an attached PDF. It was a scanned form, official, clean, but with a signature at the bottom that was supposed to be hers. It was close. Very close. But not hers. Her breath caught as she studied the forged signature. Someone had not only contacted the bank pretending to be her, they had filed paperwork to access the full amount of the fund. She clicked the reply button, her fingers flying across the screen. Mr. Desai, I did not authorize this request. The signature on the form is not mine. Please consider this my formal denial of consent. I will contact your office today to initiate a fraud report. She hit send and immediately dialed the number provided. A receptionist answered, calm and pleasant, and within minutes she was transferred to Desai. His voice was polished but tense, as if he already suspected something was wrong. Ms. Foster, thank you for getting back to us. I was about to escalate the matter internally. Who submitted the request? She asked, not bothering with pleasantries. There was an envelope delivered to our office directly, addressed with your name and return address. It included notarized copies of the death certificate, a power of attorney, and the transfer request. All seemed in order, until now. I didn't send anything. I haven't spoken to anyone about the fund, Emily said, her voice rising. There's one more thing, he added carefully. The courier who dropped it off signed in as Barbara Foster. The world went still. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, suddenly cold all over. My mother? I wasn't going to make assumptions, but yes. That's the name we recorded. She ended the call shortly after, thanking him in a voice that didn't sound like hers. She sat back in her seat, eyes unfocused. The door to the coffee shop opened behind her and she didn't even glance up. Not until she heard the voice. Emily. It was Barbara. Standing in front of her table, wearing a beige coat and pearl earrings, perfectly composed as if she were attending a brunch. She carried a slim black folder under one arm and a calm, expectant smile. We need to talk, Barbara said, already pulling out the chair opposite her. Emily stared at her, too stunned to react. I thought we could speak somewhere neutral, Barbara continued. Your place is, understandably, a mess right now. Emily said nothing. Barbara opened the folder and laid it flat between them. Inside were several documents, copies of the same forms Desai had emailed her. I didn't forge your name, Barbara said immediately, hands folded. But I did sign for you. Because I knew you wouldn't be in the right state of mind to handle this. Emily's voice was hoarse. You pretended to be me. I acted as your mother. As your support system. Someone has to make decisions now. That fund was for Noah. Not for you. Not for any of this. Barbara leaned forward slightly. And now Noah is gone. That money is sitting in a vault doing nothing while you fall apart. It could pay your bills, your therapy, your future. Do you think Jared left it to rot? Emily's eyes burned, but she held her stare. You're not entitled to a cent of it. You think this is about entitlement? Barbara scoffed. You live in a rented apartment with broken tiles and expired groceries. You let your son eat off paper plates and wear hand-me-downs while sitting on nearly $1 million in his name. Emily stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The barista looked up. Barbara didn't flinch. I didn't touch that money because it wasn't mine. Because I respected what Jared wanted. You don't get to decide what's best for me. Or for Noah. Not anymore. Barbara's calm facade cracked. Her mouth tightened, and she gathered the folder back into her arms. "This conversation isn't over," she said quietly. "You'll thank me when this storm passes." Emily didn't reply. She walked out of the cafe into the gray morning, her pulse thudding like a war drum. Behind her, Barbara didn't follow. She knew now that the loneliness at Noah's funeral hadn't been accidental. It had been orchestrated. The drive home from the coffee shop felt longer than usual. Emily kept both hands tight on the wheel, her eyes fixed ahead, but her thoughts were a chaos of unanswered questions. Her mother had looked her in the face and admitted to impersonating her. Not out of guilt, not in apology, but as if it were her right. The lack of remorse struck Emily harder than the betrayal itself. By the time she pulled into the lot of her apartment complex, her chest was tight with the weight of it all. She sat in the car for several minutes before getting out, trying to slow her breathing. Inside, the apartment was exactly as she had left it, quiet, dim, unchanged. But something had shifted. The illusion of safety was gone. She poured herself a glass of water and sat on the couch, reaching for the box that had been collecting dust on the bottom shelf of the hallway closet. It was old, taped shut, and marked in Jared's handwriting, "Noah's Docs." She had avoided opening it for years. It held everything from Jared's death, the will, legal documents, letters, and one sealed envelope with her name on it that she'd never been ready to read. Until now. The tape peeled back with a reluctant rip. Inside, the scent of paper and time greeted her. She pulled out the file folders one by one, spreading them across the coffee table. Jared had been meticulous. Even in death, he was organized. Each folder labeled, clipped, dated. There was a notarized copy of his will, the trust establishment forms, and a letter from his attorney confirming the account's protection until Noah turned 25, or in the event of his death, its full control granted to Emily. She opened the sealed envelope last. It was handwritten, dated just 3 weeks before Jared's fatal car crash. The letter was short. "Emily. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I never thought I'd be the kind of father who leaves behind a fund instead of a future, but if the worst happens, I want you to know this: protect Noah. Not just from the world, but from what's closest to us. You know what I mean. If you need help, call Dominic. He knows everything. I trust him. Love, always, J." Emily read the letter 3 times. The handwriting was unmistakably his, sharp, deliberate, and filled with weight she had ignored at the time. The name Dominic triggered something faint in her memory. Jared had worked with dozens of people during his years in tech development, but there had only been a few he kept close. She remembered Dominic vaguely, a former colleague turned consultant. Quiet, loyal. Always in the background at Jared's launch parties and investor dinners. She opened her laptop and searched through her old emails. It took time, but eventually, she found a thread. Jared had CC'd Dominic in a conversation about the trust. She clicked the email address and drafted a message. "Dominic. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Emily Foster. Jared's partner and Noah's mother. I found your name in a letter he left behind. I need to talk. It's about the trust fund, and something feels very wrong." She hit send and sat back, rubbing her temples. Her headache was a drumbeat now, dull but constant. Before she could stand, her phone rang. Unknown number. Her hand hesitated over the screen. Then she answered. "Emily Foster?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Dominic Greer. I just got your email. Tell me everything." His voice was calm, deep, but clipped. She explained, briefly, about the forged documents, Barbara's confrontation, and the bank's warning. He listened silently until she finished. "I'm not surprised," he said at last. Jared always worried this would happen. Why? What exactly did he think might happen? He never trusted your family. Said there was something in their attitude toward money, control, legacy. He said your mother used guilt as currency and your sister had a taste for shortcuts. Emily felt a surge of heat in her chest. Why didn't he tell me any of this directly? He didn't want to turn you against them without proof. He hoped you'd never need to know. She gritted her teeth. Well, now I do. I can help, Dominic said. I still have contacts at the bank, and I know the legal team that set up the fund. Jared looped me in for safekeeping, just in case. If someone's trying to override the system, they had to bypass more than just a signature. What should I do? Meet me, he said. Tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. Send me a safe address. After they hung up, Emily sat in the silence, trying to absorb what she had just learned. Jared had anticipated betrayal. From her own family. And somehow, that knowledge had been buried until now. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time, from a number she did recognize. Savannah, you need to calm down. Mom's trying to help. Don't make this uglier than it has to be. The sheer nerve of it almost made her laugh. Her sister, who hadn't spoken to her since the accident. Her sister, who hadn't come to the funeral. Now she wanted calm? Emily typed back without hesitation. You were at a party the day I buried my son. I saw the photos. Don't ever speak to me about ugly. There was no reply. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in Noah's bed, curled under the sheets that still smelled faintly of his shampoo, the fox tucked beside her. Her mind raced. She tried to remember every interaction from the past year, every offhand comment from Barbara, every snide remark from Savannah, every question that felt a little too pointed. It was all there, in fragments. Things she had dismissed at the time. Now, they pulsed with a new clarity. Morning came gray and cold. Emily dressed in dark jeans and a sweater, pulled her hair into a ponytail, and packed a folder of documents for Dominic. They agreed to meet at a small co-working cafe downtown, a place neutral enough to avoid attention. Dominic was already there when she arrived. He stood as she approached, a tall man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and a quiet presence that commanded focus. He shook her hand firmly, his expression serious. I'm sorry, he said. About Noah. He was a great kid. Thank you. They sat. Emily slid the folder across the table. Dominic opened it and scanned the contents with the efficiency of someone used to reading contracts. I've seen this before, he said, tapping the forged form. But it was always protected by biometric verification. Without your physical presence, the bank should have blocked it. They didn't, Emily said. They were days away from approving it. That's not possible unless someone inside the system tampered with the verification settings. Someone with access. A legal proxy. Or someone with administrative override. Emily's heart pounded. Are you saying this is bigger than my mother? I'm saying someone helped her. And they either did it for money, or out of loyalty to her. Dominic closed the folder. I'll start digging. But you need a lawyer. Someone aggressive. This won't stop here. She nodded. She already knew who she would call, Rachel, a friend from college who had always been fiercely protective. They hadn't spoken in a while, but if anyone could help untangle this legal nightmare, it was her. As she left the cafe, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in days. Not hope exactly. But fire. Resolve. They had crossed a line. And now, she was going to find out just how far they were willing to go. The knock on Emily's door came mid-afternoon, sharp and precise. She was in the middle of sorting through a stack of documents Rachel had asked her to locate, birth certificates, insurance forms, the original trust paperwork, when she heard it. Not a buzz at the intercom, not a phone call in advance. Just a knock. She didn't have to check the peephole. Something about the sound told her exactly who it was. She opened the door slowly. Barbara stood on the other side, wearing a navy blazer, her hair perfectly styled, lips painted in her signature shade of coral. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and her expression was unreadable, balanced somewhere between disappointment and forced diplomacy. "We need to talk," Barbara said, as if the last time they spoke hadn't involved forged signatures and financial betrayal. "I thought it was best to come directly to you." Emily didn't respond. She stepped aside, letting the door swing open without inviting her in. Barbara took that as permission and crossed the threshold, scanning the apartment like it was foreign territory. She made no comment about the state of the place, the scattered papers, the unopened mail, the untouched toys still left in Noah's room. "I brought something," she said, placing the briefcase on the kitchen table. "You'll want to see it." Emily closed the door, folded her arms across her chest, and leaned against the wall. She didn't sit. She didn't offer coffee. This wasn't going to be a visit in the traditional sense. It was a confrontation cloaked in civility. Barbara opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers held together with a gold clip. "These are from my lawyer. He's drawing up a petition that, if you cooperate, will speed things up and reduce the likelihood of court intervention." Emily's brow furrowed. "Court intervention? You mean for the trust you tried to steal from me?" Barbara didn't flinch. "No one's stealing anything, Emily. The money was left to Noah, and now that he's gone, it is, by legal definition, your responsibility. But you're not acting responsibly. You're being emotional, impulsive. That money can help this entire family, not just you." Emily crossed the room in 2 strides and slammed her palm flat against the table. "You don't get to talk about what's responsible. You weren't at the hospital. You didn't come to the funeral. You didn't even call. And now you're here with paperwork like this is a business transaction?" Barbara's mouth tightened. "Grief affects everyone differently." "No," Emily snapped. "Grief doesn't make people forge signatures and throw parties while their grandson is being buried." A flicker of something passed over Barbara's face. Not guilt. Not regret. Just mild irritation. The party wasn't about Noah. It was. "Don't." Emily held up a hand. "Don't insult both of us by pretending it was anything but a celebration of freedom. Of opportunity. Of inheritance." Barbara sat down, smoothing the front of her blazer. "You're angry. I understand. But you're also being short-sighted. That fund was set up with long-term investments. It's grown significantly. It's not just about the $850,000. It's now worth closer to $1 million. With the right moves, we could triple that in a few years." Emily stared at her mother, barely able to process the words. "We? There is no we. Barbara sighed and opened another document. "Savannah is willing to serve as co-executor. She's already familiar with the financials, and we've consulted with a fiduciary advisor who believes it's in your best interest to share responsibility." Emily's stomach turned. "Savannah? The same sister who ghosted me for months and posted pictures of herself drunk on the day of my son's funeral? That Savannah? She's more capable than you give her credit for." Emily stepped back, shaking her head. "You're not listening. I don't want your help. I don't want Savannah's help. I want you both as far away from me and Noah's legacy as possible." Barbara leaned back, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "That's not how the world works. You're not the only person affected by this. There are long-term implications to hoarding money you're emotionally incapable of managing." Emily's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "Get out. Emily. I said get out." Barbara stood, gathering her papers slowly, methodically. As she reached the door, she turned and said, "You're making a mistake. But you'll see. When the grief wears off and the bills start to pile up, you'll come around. We all do." Emily didn't reply. She held the door open until Barbara was gone, then locked it behind her. The silence that followed was thick, pressing. She leaned against the wood, her breath shaky. Her hands trembled not with fear, but with fury. She called Rachel. "You were right," she said when her friend answered. "She's not backing down. She came with legal documents and a financial strategy like it's a corporate merger. Rachel's voice was calm. Then we fight back. I want to file a motion to block them. Everything. I want to make sure they don't get within 100 feet of that fund. Then I'll need full access to the trust documents, the letter from Jared, and any communication from the bank. I'll bring it all tomorrow, Emily said. What else? Rachel paused. We're going to need to prove two things. First, that the attempted access to the fund was fraudulent. Second, that there's a pattern of manipulation or coercion that would put your judgment, or control of the fund, at risk in their eyes. We need to flip that narrative. Prove it's them who shouldn't be trusted. I have Dominic. Jared trusted him. He said he can trace how they tried to override the verification. Good, Rachel said. That's a start. But you also need to be ready for them to get uglier. If this fund has grown the way your mom says, they won't go quietly. And they won't care how much damage they cause to get what they want. Emily knew it already. She could feel the shift. This wasn't about a financial disagreement. It was about power, legacy, and control, and her family saw her as an obstacle to be removed. She spent the rest of the evening gathering everything. Jared's letter, the trust's original documents, the email from the bank, the photos from Savannah's party, the texts, everything. She created copies, scanned what she could, and organized it all into folders. One for Rachel. One for the court. One she'd keep for herself. Before bed, she stood in the doorway of Noah's room and stared at the quiet mess he'd left behind. A drawing taped to the wall showed the three of them, her, Noah, and Jared, smiling under a crooked sun. In the corner, Noah had written in uneven letters, "My family." Emily swallowed hard and walked to his desk, picking up the picture. She slipped it into her folder. Not as evidence, but as a reminder of what she was fighting for. She turned off the light, closed the door, and went to bed knowing she wouldn't sleep. The war had begun. And this time, she was going to fight like hell. Rachel's office was on the 12th floor of a glass and steel building downtown, tucked between a pediatric clinic and a commercial real estate firm. Emily arrived 10 minutes early, the folder clutched tight to her chest like armor. Her heart had been thudding with tension since dawn. After the meeting with Barbara, sleep had been elusive. Every hour or so, she'd wake with new questions, new doubts, and flashes of Jared's voice from old memories, warning her of things she hadn't understood back then. Rachel greeted her at the door with a hug, not the kind meant to comfort, but the kind two soldiers might share before heading into a fight. She was dressed in navy slacks and a crisp white blouse, her dark curls pinned back, her tone already locked in work mode. "I cleared the schedule for this morning," Rachel said as she gestured to her desk. "Let's go through everything." Emily handed over the folder and sat across from her, watching as Rachel moved with practiced efficiency. She examined every document, highlighted portions of Jared's letter, cross-checked dates, and began typing notes as she worked. It was comforting to see someone else take control, someone who didn't flinch at the complexity or try to soften the blow. "This," Rachel said, tapping the forged request form, "is the centerpiece. If we prove this is fake, everything they've built collapses. But we need more than just your denial. We need evidence of who submitted it, how they accessed your private information, and, most importantly, what they did before Noah's death." Rachel opened her laptop and pulled up the transaction history for the trust fund, which Dominic had forwarded that morning after a call with one of his bank contacts. The file was thick with entries, mostly automated growth, dividends, and scheduled investments, but one entry caught Rachel's eye immediately. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward Emily. $10,000. Transferred out of the fund 2 days before Noah's death. Emily leaned in. "That's not possible." The terms were strict. No withdrawals unless Noah died or reached 25. Rachel nodded. "Exactly. This should have triggered a fraud alert. And it didn't." She clicked through to the transaction details. The recipient account was listed only as a series of numbers, partially redacted by the bank's default privacy policy. But there was a note, small, easily overlooked. Manual override initiated by fiduciary administrator. Emily blinked. Who's the fiduciary administrator? Rachel pulled a separate document from the stack. This is where things get strange. When Jared first set up the trust, he listed the administrator as a senior partner from his legal firm. That person died 2 years ago, and the firm appointed a new one. But 6 months ago, the listed administrator changed again. To someone named Daniel Hart. Emily's brow furrowed. I've never heard of him. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Neither had I. So I looked him up. He's not with Jared's firm. In fact, he's not with any firm at all right now. He lost his license for misconduct 3 years ago, something about mishandling estates. Emily felt the air thicken around her. How the hell did he get appointed to the trust? That's the question, Rachel said. And we're going to find out. She closed the file and stood. We're going to court with this. I'll file the injunction today. We'll block any further activity on the fund, and we'll compel the bank to release full transaction records, including metadata and internal logs. If Daniel Hart was given access, someone inside helped him. Someone with influence. Possibly someone with the right last name. Emily swallowed the bile rising in her throat. You think my mother arranged it? Rachel didn't answer right away. If she didn't, she knew about it. That kind of move takes more than a name on a form. It takes connections. Pressure. Emily left the office 2 hours later with a signed affidavit and the first legal documents in hand. A court date had already been requested for the following week. Rachel was wasting no time. By the time Emily got home, her phone was buzzing again. This time, it was Dominic. I traced the receiving account from that $10,000 withdrawal, he said the moment she picked up. It was routed through 3 intermediary accounts, but it ends at a personal checking account belonging to a Savannah Foster. Emily's blood ran cold. My sister? Unless there's another Savannah Foster born in Austin, Texas, with your mother listed as next of kin, yes. Emily's hands clenched around the phone. She's been lying to my face. Saying Barbara acted alone. Saying she was just trying to help. Dominic sighed. She's involved. Deeply. And it gets worse. Worse how? The transfer was authorized not just by Daniel Hart but also by a secondary signatory. Someone claiming to be your financial proxy. There's a notarized affidavit with your name and signature. Another forgery. Emily leaned against the wall, her legs weak. So they were working together. They've been setting this up for months, Dominic said. Maybe longer. That night, Emily didn't eat. She barely drank water. She sat at the kitchen table and wrote everything out on paper, the timeline, the lies, the actions taken by Barbara and Savannah, the names, the transactions. She pinned it all to a corkboard she pulled from storage, the kind she'd once used to help Noah track his school projects. Now it was a map of betrayal. Just after midnight, a new message came in. It was from Savannah. We need to talk. Don't do anything stupid. You don't understand what's going on. Emily stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she replied. You took $10,000 from Noah's trust. I understand enough. Seconds later, another message came. That wasn't what it looks like. It was a loan. Mom said it would be temporary. She said you'd never find out. Emily's fury erupted through her fingertips. You threw a party while I buried my son. Now I know why. You were celebrating the payday. There was no response. Emily turned her phone off, shut off every light in the apartment, and went into Noah's room. She didn't cry this time. She sat on his bed, opened the drawer of his desk, and found the notebook he used to write in before bed. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before the accident. Today I learned about stars. I asked Mommy if Daddy was a star now and she said yes. I hope he sees me when I sleep. She traced the letters with her finger and made a promise out loud in the quiet room. They won't take anything else from you. Outside, the night stretched long and silent, but Emily was wide awake. She was done being passive. And now she had proof. Saturday morning arrived with a quiet that felt unnatural. Emily stood in the kitchen with a mug of coffee she had no intention of drinking, staring out the window at the world as it moved on like nothing had happened. Cars drove by. Neighbors watered plants. Dogs barked. She felt suspended in time, tethered to grief and betrayal while the rest of the world remained blissfully unaware. Dominic had promised to dig deeper into the financial trail, while Rachel was finalizing the paperwork for the emergency injunction. Emily's role now was to gather everything that could paint the full picture, not just for the court, but for herself. She needed to see the entire web, every thread, every deceit. And that's what led her to open Savannah's social media accounts that morning. She hadn't looked since the funeral. Couldn't bear to. But now, she needed answers. Savannah's profile hadn't been updated since that weekend, but her stories, archived in the highlights, told a very different tale than the one she'd been feeding Emily over text. With a few taps, Emily opened the stories from the day Noah had been buried. She muted the sound. She didn't need to hear the music. The images alone said enough. A sleek, modern rooftop venue. Guests in cocktail attire, laughing, toasting flutes of champagne. Gold decorations, a tower of macarons, and a string quartet in the background. Savannah posed in a white dress, holding a glass in one hand, her other arm wrapped around a man Emily didn't recognize. The caption beneath the photo read, "New beginnings. We're just getting started." Emily's throat tightened. She clicked through the next post. Then the next. One after another, each more galling than the last. A video of Savannah giving a toast, her smile wide, her voice animated. Though muted, Emily could read her lips at one point, to family, to future, and to the choices that free us. The bile rose in her throat. She set the phone down and stepped back, hands shaking. The event hadn't been some generic gathering or social obligation. It was a celebration. It was strategic. The timing wasn't coincidental, it was designed. And then, tucked at the end of the story series, a photo with an innocuous caption that made everything twist in Emily's gut. Savannah, Barbara, and a third man, Daniel Hart. The image was casual, blurry even. Taken by someone else across the table. But the man in the photo, leaning in with a smile and holding a whiskey glass, was the very same Daniel whose name had surfaced in the trust records. His presence at that celebration erased any plausible deniability Savannah or Barbara might have claimed. They were not reacting to Noah's death. They had planned around it. Emily saved the photo. Then she took a screenshot of the full story reel and sent it directly to Rachel. Found more. Hart was at the party. Timestamps match. They weren't just moving fast. They were ready for this before Noah died. Rachel responded a few minutes later. Get me the originals. I'll have them subpoenaed from the platform too, but I need screenshots now. This proves collusion. And it puts Hart in the center of it. Emily forwarded the entire archive, then sat back at the table, numb. It wasn't just about money anymore, it never had been. It was about narrative. About control. Her family hadn't just stolen from her. They'd rewritten the story of Noah's death into something that gave them permission to celebrate. And someone else knew. She remembered something. A conversation with Lena, the barista from the cafe she visited after the funeral. At the time, Lena had said nothing directly. Just a passing comment, funny seeing Savannah's name pop up the same day you were here. Didn't know she was your sister. Emily had been too shattered to process it. Now, she understood. Lena must have seen the posts. Emily grabbed her coat and keys and walked briskly down the block. The cafe was busy, but Lena spotted her immediately. Hey, she said, setting down a tray. You okay? Can I talk to you for a second? Emily asked, her voice low but steady. Lena nodded and led her to a quieter corner near the back, away from the espresso machine and morning chatter. You mentioned something last time I was here, Emily said. About Savannah. You saw something online? Lena hesitated. I wasn't trying to be nosy. It just showed up in my feed. A mutual posted photos from some party downtown. I saw her name and thought, wait, isn't that the day of the funeral? It felt weird. Do you still have the post? Lena pulled out her phone and opened her saved items. Within seconds, she found it. A public post from a photographer's page, photos from the rooftop event, including several Emily hadn't seen. One showed Savannah and Barbara in conversation with Daniel Hart, seated on a couch with champagne glasses and a laptop open between them. You said this was posted the same day? Emily asked. Same afternoon, Lena confirmed. It went up while you were still sitting by the window. I remember because the contrast hit me so hard. Emily took a photo of the post and sent it to Rachel immediately, adding a note, confirmed public presence. Laptop open. Business being discussed. Witnesses possible. Rachel's reply was swift. This helps. A lot. The more public their involvement, the harder it is to claim ignorance. And if we can find someone who heard what was said that day, we have direct witness testimony. Emily turned back to Lena. Would you be willing to write a statement? Just saying you saw this post, when it was posted, and that I was here when it appeared? Lena hesitated for a breath, then nodded. Of course. I'll do it tonight. Back at the apartment, Emily compiled the new evidence into another folder. Photos. Screenshots. Posts. Witness statement. Each one a nail in the coffin of their carefully constructed lie. Later that evening, she received another message, this time from an anonymous number. You're making this worse than it needs to be. We can still split the fund and walk away clean. Think about it. You don't have to drag this into court. You're grieving. No one will blame you for stepping aside. Emily stared at the message, her face calm but her jaw clenched. She typed one line in response. See you in court. And then she blocked the number. That night, she sat on Noah's bed again, holding the fox plush, staring at the ceiling. The grief was still there, still sharp, still present, but now it sat beside a growing force she hadn't expected. Conviction. She wasn't fighting for money. She wasn't fighting just for justice. She was fighting because they had turned her son's death into a strategy. Because they had erased his memory in favor of a financial opportunity. And because if she didn't fight, they'd do it again, somehow, somewhere, to someone else. But not this time. Not with her. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of her phone vibrating against the nightstand. For a split second, she hoped it was a mistake, someone calling the wrong number. But when she picked it up and saw Rachel's name on the screen, reality snapped back into place. There's been a development, Rachel said without greeting. Her voice was tense, clipped. Emily sat upright. What kind? The bank has confirmed that someone attempted a full transfer of the trust fund yesterday afternoon. The paperwork was submitted electronically and flagged for fraud, thanks to our injunction, but the timing is suspicious. Emily was already on her feet, crossing the room to grab her laptop. They're trying again. They're not just trying. They're escalating. The submission used a new version of your signature, more accurate. Someone's getting help from inside. They had routing information, your legal ID number, and an updated death certificate for Noah. Emily froze. Updated? What does that mean? It means someone submitted a version that omits the cause of death. That's not even legal. Rachel sighed. It is, under certain circumstances. A redacted version can be requested through specific channels, for privacy reasons. But it requires either a court order or next of kin authorization. The request was filed by Barbara Foster. Emily's mind reeled. The only way her mother could have obtained that document was by posing as the sole guardian. She was rewriting records to manipulate the system. Sanitizing the paper trail. Controlling the narrative. Rachel continued. I've contacted the bank. The fraud unit is launching an internal investigation. But here's the real concern, had we not filed the injunction when we did, the transfer would have gone through. Do we know where the money was going? Yes. The account number is connected to a shell corporation registered in Delaware. It's under the name Harland & Company. Holdings. Guess who the listed executive is? Emily didn't need to guess. Daniel Hart. Exactly. This is no longer just a family dispute. It's organized. Premeditated. And it crosses state lines. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself. The room was too quiet. Noah's fox plush still sat beside her on the bed. She reached for it, held it in her hands. I'm done reacting, she said finally. It's time to act. Rachel's tone shifted. What are you thinking? I want to go to the bank. In person. I want to meet with whoever's handling the fraud case, put a face to this name, and make it very clear that if they don't shut this down completely, I'm going to the press. Rachel paused. You sure you're ready for that kind of exposure? I'm not sure about anything, Emily said. Except that I'm not going to let them take this from me. Not without a fight. 2 hours later, Emily was seated in a conference room inside a high-rise building in Midtown. The walls were glass, the chairs too comfortable, and the atmosphere sterile in a way that felt designed to keep people like her from making noise. But she didn't care. She had walked in with a folder of evidence, her head held high, and a fire in her voice. The fraud investigator assigned to the case was a woman named Irene Hall. Middle-aged, firm handshake, sharp eyes. She reviewed the documents Emily provided, screenshots of the social media posts, photos of the party, the witness statement from Lena, and the timeline Rachel had assembled. This is disturbing, Irene admitted, tapping her pen against the file. The coordination, the signatures, the legal filings. It's not amateur. No, it's not, Emily said. Which is why I'm here. I'm not going to be another silent victim. Irene nodded slowly. We've already begun compiling internal access logs. There's evidence someone within our institution may have assisted with the redacted death certificate submission. If that's confirmed, it's grounds for criminal charges. Good, Emily said. Because I want every person who helped them to face consequences. When she left the building, the clouds overhead had darkened. The air smelled like rain. Emily pulled her coat tighter and walked without stopping, her pace quick, purposeful. For the first time since Noah's death, she didn't feel like the victim of a tragedy. She felt like the architect of a reckoning. That evening, Rachel called again. We got the court date. 2 weeks from today. Emily exhaled. That's sooner than I expected. I pushed, Rachel said. And the judge agreed this qualifies as an emergency hearing. But that's not all. Dominic just sent over something big. What? A copy of an email chain between Barbara, Savannah, and Daniel Hart. It's encrypted, but Dominic's contact decrypted it. The subject line reads, Contingency Plan. The body of the message discusses backup steps in case the primary transfer fails, including using a sympathetic therapist's report to challenge your mental fitness. Emily's blood turned to ice. They're planning to make me look unstable. They're not planning. They've already started. There's a notation in the email referencing a therapist named Dr. Alma Reed. She's registered as having submitted a letter to the court suggesting you're struggling to maintain mental clarity following bereavement. That's a lie, Emily said. I've never even met Dr. Reed. She's real. Licensed. But she's not your doctor. They're hoping to introduce her letter as expert testimony. Emily stood from her chair and paced the room, her hand pressed to her forehead. This is a smear campaign. Yes, Rachel said. And it's exactly why we're filing a preemptive objection. I'll issue a subpoena for all communications related to that letter, and if Dr. Reed testifies under false pretenses, she'll lose her license. Emily stopped pacing. We need to go further. I agree. No, I mean, it's not enough to win in court. I want to expose them. All of them. Publicly. I want people to see what they did. Rachel was quiet for a beat. Then we prepare a statement. For after the hearing. If things go well, and they will, we'll go to the press. Emily hung up, her mind already racing ahead. That night, she pulled out her old journal and began writing, not the story of the fund, or the fraud, or the courtroom. But the story of Noah. Who he was. What he loved. What they took from him when they decided his death was their opportunity. And for every lie they told, she wrote a truth. She didn't sleep, not because she was afraid, but because for the first time, she could see the path forward. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the erasure of her son's dignity. And she was going to make sure the world remembered him not as a trust fund or a legal case, but as a little boy who mattered. Morning would come soon. And with it, war. The days that followed moved like molasses, slow, heavy, but charged with mounting tension. Emily knew the silence wasn't a pause, it was preparation. Her mother, Savannah, and Daniel Hart had gone quiet. No more texts. No more sudden moves with the trust. But their absence was not surrender. It was a lull before something worse. Rachel had filed the objection to the fraudulent psychological testimony and submitted a formal complaint to the state licensing board against Dr. Alma Reed. Dominic continued tracking digital traces, mapping financial transfers and IP logins that tied the orchestrated scheme directly back to Barbara's home internet network. The evidence was growing like a case file set on fire. And yet, something still gnawed at Emily. An itch behind her ribs, a sense that something, or someone, was still missing from the equation. She felt it every time she reread the contingency plan email. The tone wasn't just legal or strategic, it was personal. There was a familiarity to it, especially in the way Savannah had written. The words were polished, but the manipulation was unmistakably intimate. There were phrases Savannah never used. Phrases Emily recognized. Because they were hers. She started looking back. Old texts. Emails. Messages exchanged over the past year. Every conversation where she'd confided her fears about money, grief, loneliness. She had always been guarded around her family, but not with everyone. Not entirely. There had been someone else. Her name was Caroline. A friend from work, or so Emily had believed. They had met during Emily's second year as a night nurse. Caroline had recently transferred from another department and quickly struck up conversation during long shifts. Emily had opened up to her slowly, carefully, over time. Caroline had been supportive, often too supportive, offering advice that now felt eerily similar to things Savannah had parroted weeks later. At the time, Emily thought it was just coincidence. People shared language, after all. But now she wasn't so sure. She found their last text thread. Caroline had left the hospital 6 months ago, claiming she needed time off to care for her father. There had been no warning. Just a polite goodbye. Emily hadn't thought much of it then. But now she looked closer. Caroline's number had been from a different state. Unusual, but not impossible. And she had never accepted Emily's invitation to connect on social media. Never once posted a photo. Never shared a personal detail that could be verified. Emily had assumed she was just private. She forwarded the contact to Dominic, who called her back within 20 minutes. Caroline Harrow doesn't exist, he said. What? The name's fake. There's no record of her in the hospital's HR system. The ID she used was legitimate, but it belonged to someone else, an actual traveling nurse who never worked in your department. Whoever you were talking to was using borrowed credentials. Emily's pulse kicked into high gear. So who was she? I don't have a name yet, Dominic said. But I do have a location. The phone number she used? It was registered to a family plan. Guess who the primary account holder is? Barbara, Emily whispered. No, Dominic said grimly. It's under Savannah Foster. Emily sat down hard. Her knees gave slightly, and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. They planted her, she said. They put someone in my workplace. To get close to me. To learn everything I was feeling. Everything I might do. Dominic didn't argue. That's what it looks like. Emily's thoughts spun. Every conversation she'd had with Caroline came rushing back, vulnerabilities shared, questions about Jared's will, even casual mentions of her emotional state. Caroline had always nudged her to take time off, suggesting she wasn't coping well, offering to connect her with someone. Emily had declined, thinking it was unnecessary. But now she realized it had all been part of the setup. Preparing the groundwork to declare her mentally unfit when the time came. She called Rachel, told her everything. This is psychological warfare, Rachel said. And illegal on several counts. Impersonation. Workplace fraud. Witness tampering. We'll need statements from your old colleagues confirming Caroline's presence and absence from payroll. I'll get them, Emily said. And there's one more thing. She pulled out her old work phone, which she hadn't turned on in months. It was mostly used for shift scheduling and internal messages. She charged it, waited for it to boot, and opened the internal chat app used by hospital staff. Caroline's messages were still there. Emily scrolled through until she found one from 7 months ago, just before Caroline left. It was a long message, unusually emotional, almost like a goodbye letter. But at the very bottom, there was a small attachment. A PDF. Emily opened it, and froze. It was a document titled, Grant Application, D.M. Foster. The header bore the logo of a foundation Emily had never applied to. The body of the document described a bereaved single mother struggling to manage a sizable inheritance and outlined a proposal for long-term financial guardianship. The file included false details, diagnoses Emily had never received, debts she didn't owe. It was a narrative. One written in her name. She forwarded the file to Rachel immediately, along with screenshots of the message and Caroline's chat history. Rachel's response came within minutes. This changes everything. They weren't just preparing for your collapse, they were scripting it. If we can prove this file was being drafted before Noah's death, it creates a timeline of intent. Emily looked at the file again. It was dated. Time-stamped. And the metadata revealed it had been created using software registered to, of all people, Daniel Hart. Rachel filed a motion for digital discovery within the hour. The following morning, Emily received an unexpected call from Savannah. She hesitated before answering. What do you want? Emily asked, her voice flat. I want to fix this, Savannah said. You have no idea what's really going on. I know enough. I know about Caroline. About the grant file. About Daniel Hart. About the $10,000 you stole. There was silence. Then a sigh. Mom promised me it would be temporary, Savannah said quietly. She said you were too broken to handle the fund. That if we didn't act fast, the bank would tie it up in red tape for years. So your solution was to lie to me? To spy on me at work? I didn't know about Caroline until later, Savannah admitted. And by then, it was too late to stop. Mom has Daniel wrapped around her finger. He was desperate for cash, and she promised him a cut. I tried to stay out of it. No, you didn't, Emily said coldly. You partied while I buried my son. I regret that, Savannah whispered. Emily's voice didn't waver. Save it for court. She ended the call. That night, Emily sat at her kitchen table and updated the timeline on her corkboard. She added new entries, Caroline's infiltration, the fake grant file, the shell company, and the redacted death certificate. Each pushpin marked another lie, another betrayal. But each one also marked progress. They had tried to destroy her quietly. But now, everything they'd buried was coming to the surface. And she wasn't going to stop digging. Emily arrived at Rachel's office before 9 o'clock in the morning, carrying a flash drive, a legal pad filled with handwritten notes, and an envelope she had nearly talked herself out of bringing. The envelope contained a copy of Noah's final school photo and a drawing he had made of their family, folded into a letter Emily had written the night before. She wasn't sure yet what she'd do with it, but she knew she needed to carry it with her. This wasn't just a legal fight. It was personal. Every line, every tactic, every defense was about Noah. Rachel was already at her desk when Emily stepped inside. She wore a black blazer and had a stack of documents in front of her, each tabbed and color-coded. She looked up and gave Emily a sharp nod, her expression focused but unreadable. "I've reviewed everything from last night," she said, gesturing toward the papers. "The metadata on that grant application, the hospital messages, and the call log showing communication between Caroline's burner number and Savannah's real phone, all of it's admissible." Emily handed over the flash drive. "Here's everything compiled. Screenshots, audio memos, timestamps." Rachel plugged it in and opened the files without hesitation. Dominic sent an update too. He pulled security footage from the bank's visitor logs. 2 weeks before the attempted transfer, Barbara was seen entering with Daniel Hart. They were recorded in the private client wing, speaking with an advisor. "Let me guess," Emily said. "The advisor no longer works there." Rachel nodded. "We're trying to subpoena his records, but the trail may have gone cold. Still, the footage helps. It places Barbara and Daniel together, on site, during a period when no contact with you was recorded. That supports our claim of forgery and intent to defraud." Emily sat across from Rachel, laying her notebook on the table. "They're going to argue I'm unstable. That I'm lashing out from grief." Rachel met her eyes. "Then we control the narrative. We don't pretend grief isn't real, we show that you are grieving and functioning. That you are doing everything by the book. That your actions are those of a protective parent, not an unfit one. I'm not sure how much more I have to give." Rachel softened, just slightly. "You've already given everything. But now you have to let me take the lead in court. Let me fight with the law while you stand tall with the truth." There was a knock on the office door. Dominic stepped in, dressed in a tailored coat, holding a thin manila folder. "I have something," he said without preamble. He crossed the room and laid the folder on Rachel's desk. Inside were printed screenshots of a private forum used by financial consultants and estate planners. Someone, using the alias D.F. Trustman, had posted questions weeks before Noah's death, asking about early disbursement methods from a protected minors trust fund. The user described a scenario eerily similar to Emily's: a single mother, a deceased father, a sizable fund, and the need to secure access before age 25. Rachel read quickly. "This username's IP?" Dominic nodded. "Savannah's address. I cross-checked with her router's metadata. The activity was logged on the same night she uploaded a new story from her apartment." Emily rubbed her eyes. She was rehearsing the scam in public. Trying to crowdsource loopholes, Dominic said. What she didn't count on was the forum being monitored for legal ethics violations. One of the admins flagged the post months ago and logged the IP. Rachel sat back. That might be the final nail. They began preparing their argument for the hearing, now only a week away. Rachel drafted a formal statement outlining the timeline of fraud, betrayal, and digital manipulation. She included every name, every role: Barbara, Savannah, Daniel Hart, Dr. Reed, and now D.F. Trustman. As they worked, Emily brought out the envelope. "I wrote something," she said, setting it down. "I don't know if I'll read it in court, but I needed to write it." Rachel took the envelope and held it without opening it. "Whatever you decide, it'll be there." They worked until the sun began to lower in the sky, until the folders were heavy with evidence and the strategy was clear. That evening, Emily returned home to find a letter taped to her front door. It wasn't in an envelope. Just a single sheet of paper, typed in block letters. This doesn't have to go public. There's still time to walk away. If you don't, we'll make sure you're remembered as unstable, unfit, and unwell. Think of how Noah would feel if he saw you like this. No signature. No name. Just a warning. Emily read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and added it to the evidence folder. This was desperation. And desperation meant they were scared. She called Rachel. They left a threat at my door. Rachel didn't hesitate. Send me a photo and file a police report. We'll have it entered into the case as an intimidation attempt. Emily did exactly that. She met with an officer, filed the report, and documented everything. When she got home, she turned on every light in the apartment and sat by the window, watching the street. Her hands were steady. Her heartbeat was calm. They had tried to scare her. But fear was no longer in control. The next day, Rachel confirmed they had received the judge's approval for sealed witness statements. Emily could submit Lena's testimony, the former co-worker's confirmations about Caroline, and the messages between Savannah and Hart, without needing them to be present at the hearing. One step closer. That night, Emily wrote a second letter. This one was for herself. You are not broken. You are not dramatic. You are not paranoid. You are a mother. And they tried to erase that. But they failed. They will fail again. She folded the letter and tucked it behind Noah's drawing on the corkboard. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees in the courtyard. It sounded like change. Emily turned off the light, but she didn't sleep. She didn't need to. She was ready. The courthouse stood pale against the morning sky, its stone facade washed in muted tones by the overcast light. Emily walked up the steps slowly, her fingers clenched around the leather handle of her case folder. Each step felt like part of a procession, not just toward justice, but toward the truth. Rachel walked beside her, composed as ever, her bag slung over one shoulder and her stride confident. Behind them, Dominic followed with a secure briefcase containing digital evidence and transcripts. This wasn't just a hearing, it was the first public crack in the mask her family had worn for years. They passed through security without incident. Inside, the air was crisp, almost sterile, and the benches in the waiting area were mostly empty. Emily kept her eyes fixed forward, but she could feel the others arriving behind her. Barbara's voice was unmistakable, low, measured, rehearsed. Try to keep your tone respectful, Barbara said to someone in a hushed voice. She'll already be playing the grieving mother. Don't give the judge reason to think we're the villains. Emily didn't turn around. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Savannah's heels clicked with a nervous rhythm on the floor as she passed. She offered Emily a glance that was part pity, part calculation. She was dressed in gray, understated, like she was here for a conference, not a legal battle about her dead nephew's legacy. Daniel Hart arrived last. He avoided eye contact entirely and sat beside Savannah without speaking. His skin looked sallow, and there was a nervous twitch in his jaw. Emily didn't need confirmation, he had been coached to keep quiet and let the women speak. When the bailiff called them in, Emily took her place at the petitioner's table. Rachel sat to her right. Across the aisle, Barbara and Savannah flanked a polished attorney Emily didn't recognize. He was young, confident, and clearly under the impression that charm would carry the day. The judge entered a moment later, an older man with a calm demeanor and a sharp eye. He reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. This hearing concerns the contested management of the fiduciary trust fund established for the late Noah Foster, he began. The petition to block immediate disbursement is accompanied by allegations of fraud, forgery, and attempted misappropriation. We will proceed in order. Rachel stood. Your Honor, we'd like to begin by submitting direct evidence of premeditated attempts to access the fund through illegal means. She handed over a binder marked with chronological tabs, each one corresponding to a key event. The forged signature. the redacted death certificate, the shell company, the encrypted emails, the burner phone. The judge flipped through the contents silently for a full minute before gesturing for her to continue. Rachel spoke clearly. We have traced multiple coordinated efforts to bypass the original terms of the trust. These efforts involved the impersonation of the account's sole legal guardian, the recruitment of a disbarred attorney, and the orchestration of a psychological assessment intended to falsely declare the petitioner unfit. Barbara's attorney rose. Objection to characterizations not yet substantiated. Overruled, the judge said, his eyes never leaving the binder. Continue. Rachel did not hesitate. We have also secured statements from hospital staff confirming the presence of an individual using false identification, embedded in the petitioner's workplace for months. This individual communicated regularly with the respondents and helped script a false narrative around Ms. Foster's mental health. We submit these records as Exhibit 14. Emily kept her hands still, her gaze forward, her breath measured. She didn't need to perform. The truth was loud enough on its own. The judge turned toward Barbara. Do you deny submitting the request for early disbursement? Barbara stood, chin high. No, Your Honor. But I did so out of necessity. My daughter was not in the right state to manage such a responsibility after the loss of her child. I believed I was acting in her best interest. You believed it necessary to submit forged documents? Barbara hesitated. The signature was an interpretation. I had every reason to believe Emily would agree, had she been capable of understanding the urgency. Rachel cut in. Your Honor, the urgency referred to was not about funeral costs or legal obligations. It was about securing the transfer of assets to a private account, one now confirmed to be owned by the respondent's daughter, Savannah Foster. The judge turned to Savannah. Do you deny receiving $10,000 from the trust account 2 days before the decedent's death? Savannah looked shaken. It was a mistake. A temporary advance. My mother said. Rachel raised her hand. We have digital records of a financial planning forum in which Ms. Foster posed questions under a pseudonym about early disbursement loopholes. These posts predate Noah's passing by nearly 2 months. Barbara's attorney tried to interject again, but the judge silenced him with a look. Let me be clear, the judge said. This court does not tolerate the weaponization of grief to justify theft. The trust fund in question was not a family asset. It was a protected estate for a minor. And from what I see here, it became a target the moment that child could no longer defend it himself. Barbara bristled, her expression tightening. Emily is unstable. She's emotional, irrational. She's using this hearing to lash out at the only people left who care about her. Rachel calmly opened another folder. This is a letter drafted under the name of Dr. Alma Reed, alleging emotional instability and recommending guardianship transfer. Dr. Reed has since confirmed that she never treated Miss Foster, and the letter was solicited through fraudulent representation. A formal ethics complaint is pending. The judge turned to Daniel Hart. Mr. Hart, do you wish to address your involvement? Daniel opened his mouth but closed it again. His hands trembled slightly on the table. I have no comment, he muttered. The judge made a notation on his pad. Then he looked back at Emily. Miss Foster, would you like to make a statement before I issue my ruling? Emily rose. Her throat was dry, but her voice was steady. My son died in an accident that changed everything. And while I was grieving, the people closest to me turned that grief into strategy. They looked at the trust as an opportunity, not a legacy. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because that money belonged to Noah, and now it represents the last promise I made to him, to protect what was his. This isn't about wealth. It's about dignity. She sat down. The silence that followed was so complete, she could hear the soft click of the judge's pen as he set it aside. I am granting the motion to block all activity on the trust account until a full investigation is complete, he said. In the interim, Ms. Foster will retain sole control of the trust as originally designated. A protective order will also be issued preventing Barbara and Savannah Foster from contacting Ms. Foster directly or acting on her behalf in any legal or financial matter. Furthermore, the court will refer Mr. Hart's actions to the State Bar for immediate review. Barbara's mouth opened in protest, but the gavel came down before she could speak. The courtroom emptied slowly. Barbara left without a word. Savannah followed, her shoulders hunched, her expression vacant. Daniel Hart walked out last, his steps unsteady. Rachel turned to Emily. "You won." Emily didn't smile. She nodded once and said, "No. We started winning. But I'm not done." Because winning in court was only part of it. The next part would be telling the world. The afternoon light slanted through the tall window in Rachel's law office, casting long shadows across the floor. Emily sat across from Rachel and Dominic, her hands wrapped around a fresh cup of tea. Her throat was raw, but her resolve sharper than ever. Papers, certificates, USB sticks, every piece of evidence they had gathered, were spread out like fragments of a broken mirror. In those pieces, Emily saw more than betrayal. She saw a larger conspiracy. And Dominic had just found the piece Emily hadn't realized was missing. "I've traced the email chain back further," Dominic said, tapping his pen on a highlighted line in the printed message. "It goes back another month before what we thought was the plan's starting point." Emily blinked. "You mean before Barbara's requests for redacted death certificates, before Caroline's messages?" He nodded. "Yes. There's a reply-all email thread, from a group of legal consultants, financial planners, and estate advisors. Someone in Barbara's network forwarded part of Jared's original trust documents, copies of your signatures on early drafts, and correspondence that should have been private between you and Jared's attorney, stuff never disclosed to you." Emily felt a wave of nausea. "How did they get that?" Dominic's mouth tightened. "That's the shocking part. The email was opened from your work computer, logged in under your credentials, almost 2 months ago. But no one was there when it was supposedly you." Rachel leaned forward. "So someone pretended to be you on your hospital's network, accessed attorney-client documents, and shared them in this group. That's a breach of digital privacy, legal confidentiality, likely malpractice. It also shows premeditation. They were collecting your materials before anything else." Emily sat very still for a moment, trying to absorb what this meant. Not just a fight over forged signatures or stolen funds. Someone had been inside her life, collecting secrets, instruments, documents that would give them leverage. Someone who seemed to know more about her state of mind than she realized. "Do we know who initiated the forward?" Emily asked. Dominic thumbed through the emails. "The email trace shows that the forwarding address belongs to the assistant at Jared's old law firm, before his death. Jade Thompson. She left 6 months ago. Her departure was abrupt. Exit interview said personal reasons. But her access was never fully deactivated." Emily's heart pounded. A cold clarity rushed through her. Her old friends at work, her family, none had suspected. But Jade had been close enough to the legal file, close enough to see the initial drafts, the correspondence, maybe even the letter Jared wrote to her that warned her to protect Noah from what was closest. Jade had access. That meant Barbara's scheme had reached beyond just blood, but into the professional infrastructure around Jared. Rachel looked up, eyes wary. If this holds in court, it changes everything. Not only were they forging signatures, but they also compromised your attorney's privilege. Which is very serious. We'll need to subpoena Jade Thompson, and get her to explain why she forwarded privileged documents. Also find logs showing what else was copied or moved." Emily exhaled slowly. "And that email, forwarding Jared's draft will documents. That means someone must have been complicit at the law firm too." Dominic nodded. "Yes. And, this is bigger than what your mother and sister planned. There are possibly multiple parties involved, professionals who enabled access, legal insiders, and those manipulating your life narrative." Emily closed her eyes, remembering Jared's letter, "If something has gone wrong, protect Noah." Not just from the world, but from what's closest to us. Those words felt like a pulley pulling up the corners of a hidden trap. Everything had been closer than she imagined. There was a knock at the door. Rachel's assistant entered, holding an envelope. "This just came for you," she said, placing it on the desk in front of Emily. Emily opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a stack of photographs, Polaroids, taken without her knowledge. One showed her car parked outside Barbara's house, another, the driveway at night with a silhouette near her back door, another, someone inside her apartment building, through a window, holding a smartphone. No names. Grainy images. But the timestamps matched nights she had stayed in, alone. Nights when Caroline's messages had ramped up. Her skin crawled. Someone had been watching. Tracking. Documenting. "You see what I mean?" Emily said softly. Rachel nodded. "Yes. This is surveillance. Intimidation. It's evidence of planned misconduct. Threatening behavior. It supports your case for harassment and protective orders beyond financial control." Emily pressed her palms to her eyes, then let them drop. "I want all of this in the record. I want cameras, logs, everything about who took these photos. Background checks on Jade Thompson's devices. Data extraction from my workplace computer. And, whatever phone number used to send the threats taped to my door." Dominic spoke up. "I already coordinated with a cyber forensics team. Extracted metadata from the threats, traced the IP of the photos. It matches an address, Barbara's second property. The name isn't him directly. But the router used matches one of hers, associated with Savannah's roommate's name on utility bills." Emily felt the path ahead widening and darkening both at once. There would be no quiet resolution now. No private settlement. Rachel folded her hands. "This will be messy. It will be exposed. Are you ready for that?" Emily stood up, her silhouette rigid in the darkening room. "I have to be. Because protecting Noah wasn't enough. She had to stop the people who tried to reshape his story into something ugly. She had to reclaim her own narrative, drenched in truth." The revelation hit her like ice. Betrayal was not just familial. It was structural. It had penetrated her home, her workplace, her legal circle. They had created a network of deceit so extensive she had overlooked it for too long. And now the final pieces of the puzzle were coming into place. Rachel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow, at the hearing, you will not just defend the fund. You'll expose them. All of them." Emily nodded. She felt the weight behind her eyes, but also a clarity. Pain, yes. But also something she hadn't felt in weeks, strength. She looked at the drawing of Noah pinned behind her. The crooked sun, his smile. She whispered to the empty room, "They can't erase you. Not this time." Outside the window, the sky had turned a bruised purple. Rain was coming. But Emily didn't flinch. Because this was the moment where everything changed. The hearing had ended in legal victory, but Emily knew the war was far from over. The decision to block access to the trust fund had wounded her family's plans, but it hadn't dismantled their willingness to fight dirty. That much became clear the following morning when she opened her email and found over 50 new messages flooding her inbox, some anonymous, some from burner accounts, all containing a blend of veiled threats, false accusations, and social media posts twisting the facts. One message read, "You've disgraced your son's memory. All for money." Another, "Enjoy your moment. It won't last. Mothers like you don't win." They weren't just trying to discredit her in court anymore. They were building a campaign, using lies, manipulation, and fake narratives to paint her as unstable, greedy, and cruel. Some of the messages contained altered images. One showed her at a bar, smiling, with a fabricated caption, celebrating her payout while her son's ashes cool. Emily hadn't been to a bar in over a year. Rachel called just as she was scrolling through the messages, her voice already laced with urgency. "I'm seeing the posts," Rachel said. They're escalating. This is a targeted smear campaign, and it looks like they're using bot accounts to amplify it. I'm getting flooded, Emily replied. They've already pushed 2 of the posts to a local parenting forum. There's a thread titled, "Nurse Mom Lies About Dead Son's Trust." Rachel cursed softly. I've contacted a digital rights attorney. We're going to request takedowns, but more importantly, we'll identify the source accounts. If we can tie them back to your mother, Savannah, or Hart, it becomes evidence of defamation and intimidation. Emily rubbed her temples. They're desperate. Yes, Rachel said. Because you're winning. That afternoon, Emily met with Lena at the cafe, now under a private legal contract as a cooperating witness. Lena had more than just her original statement. She had screen recordings of Savannah's public Instagram story from the day of the funeral and a comment thread that revealed something explosive. She responded to someone named D, Lena said, scrolling to the saved file. At the time, it didn't seem like much. But now? Emily watched the video as Lena played it. The comment appeared beneath the post of Savannah holding a champagne flute. "You're glowing, Vanna." Did it go through? Savannah had replied, "Almost. Just waiting for D to push final paperwork. She won't know until it's too late." Emily stared at the comment. She admitted it publicly. D is Daniel Hart. Push final paperwork, that's the attempted transfer. She deleted the post hours later, Lena said. But not before I screen recorded it. Timestamp and all. Emily sent the clip to Rachel, who called back within minutes. This is perfect, Rachel said. Now we have a public admission from Savannah tying her directly to the fraud and proving timeline alignment. Combined with the surveillance photos, the forged email headers, and Jade Thompson's unauthorized file access, we've built a case strong enough for civil and criminal liability. Dominic followed up the next day with an even more unsettling discovery. They're setting up for something bigger, he told Emily during a late-night call. I intercepted a message in a legal server forum. Someone anonymously requested the best strategies for filing an emergency injunction against a trust controller citing mental deterioration post-litigation defeat. Emily's blood ran cold. They're planning to file a new motion against me. Dominic didn't respond right away. The timing fits. They're hoping to create a new legal channel to challenge your authority. They may try to petition for medical reevaluation. Maybe even attempt to get guardianship reassigned again, possibly under court-monitored administration. Emily closed her eyes. They'll say I'm unraveling because of the online posts. They're baiting me into a breakdown. They're building the next front of the war, Dominic confirmed. And they're counting on you getting too tired to fight. But Emily wasn't tired. She was angry. She spent the next 48 hours preparing a public statement. Not through social media, not through a lawyer, but through a carefully written letter addressed to her community, published by a respected online local journal where one of her former college classmates now worked as an editor. The headline was simple: what they tried to take from me, a mother's truth. In it, she detailed the facts, not the hearsay, not the accusations. She laid out the timeline, the fraudulent activity, the manipulation. She reframed the narrative from scandal to survival, from greed to justice. She didn't name her mother or sister directly, but the implications were clear. She included a photo of Noah. Not the sanitized school photo. Not the one they tried to erase. But a candid shot, Noah on the beach, hair windblown, laughing into the sun, his arms wide like he was about to fly. By the time the article went live, the smear threads were already beginning to shift. Some users deleted their comments. Others began asking questions. A few, previously neutral, posted messages of support. One read, "If this is true, she's not just fighting for her son. She's fighting for every parent who's ever been betrayed by the people closest to them." Rachel called within hours. "You shifted the story," she said. "This isn't a private battle anymore. Now it's public. And that changes everything." Emily knew it wouldn't end there. Barbara would retaliate. Savannah would panic. Hart might disappear altogether. But the truth had been spoken. Not in court documents, but in her own voice. The morning after the article went live, Emily received a handwritten letter slipped under her door. No return address. No signature. Just a note scrawled in jagged black ink. You're playing with fire. Back down. Last chance. She burned it in her kitchen sink. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the next phase. They thought destroying her reputation would silence her. They thought exhaustion would break her. They thought grief would bury her. But Emily had already buried her son. And now, she was coming for every lie they ever told. 3 weeks had passed since the article was published, and the world had started to shift. Emily felt the change in subtle ways, how people at the grocery store looked at her with something resembling respect instead of pity, how messages from strangers came in not to mock but to thank, and how even silence, once heavy with judgment, now seemed filled with understanding. Rachel called early that Monday morning with a tone that meant business. "We just got confirmation," she said. "The district attorney's office is opening a formal investigation into Daniel Hart." Emily set her coffee cup down, barely breathing. "For what charges?" "Forgery, fraud, unlawful practice of law, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The DA believes there's enough to move forward, and he's requested additional documents from the Bar Association and the Financial Oversight Board." Emily stood, one hand gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "What about Barbara and Savannah?" Rachel paused. "Their names appear in the same document request. If the grand jury finds enough corroboration from our side, it could lead to indictments for conspiracy and fraudulent misrepresentation. It's real now, Emily. They're not just suspects in a private dispute anymore. They're targets in a criminal case." The news didn't bring relief. Not yet. Emily had learned by now that justice moved slowly, and even when it did, it never filled the space left behind by betrayal. But it brought something else, validation. That every word she had spoken, every page of evidence she had assembled, had cracked through the lies. By mid-afternoon, Rachel arrived at Emily's apartment with the final court packet in hand. The trust was now under Emily's exclusive control, shielded by judicial protection, and any attempt to contact her regarding the fund would result in contempt charges. "It's over," Rachel said softly. "At least, the part they had control over." Emily held the envelope containing the finalized ruling and nodded once. "Now it's my turn." Later that evening, she returned to the cemetery at Auburn Hills. The sun was low in the sky, casting long golden streaks across the grass. She walked slowly, alone, her shoes crunching softly against the gravel path. She carried a single item, a weathered envelope she had sealed the night before, containing the letter she had written for Noah months ago but had never found the courage to leave behind. She reached his grave and sat beside it in the quiet. "Hi, baby," she whispered, her voice catching slightly. There was no wind. No movement. Just the steady breath of the earth beneath her. "I did what I promised. I protected you. Even after they tried to take everything, your name, your memory, your future, I fought. And I'll keep fighting, every time they try again." She pulled the envelope from her coat pocket and placed it on the stone. "I hope you know," she said. "You were never a fund. Never a legacy to be distributed. You were my son. And I was your mom. That's all that matters." The tears came quietly. Not in heaving sobs or broken cries, but in soft, persistent drops that fell one after another. She didn't fight them. She let them fall until the ache in her chest loosened slightly, until the silence around her no longer felt like punishment. When she stood, she didn't look back. The next day, Emily visited the law office where Jared's will had been first drawn. A new partner had taken over since his passing, a woman named Carol Jensen. Emily met with her to revise the fund's terms. She wanted it renamed Noah's Trust, she said. But with a new purpose. Carol raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "A scholarship," Emily explained. For children of single parents. For families who've lost someone and need a second chance. Not just for tuition, but therapy, relocation, emergency housing. Whatever gives them a shot at stability. Carol nodded, already taking notes. Emily handed her the rewritten mission statement. I want it to be clean. No family oversight. No legacy clauses. Just help. Pure and simple. It took 2 hours to finalize the first draft. When she left the office, Emily felt something she hadn't in months: purpose. That same week, an investigative podcast picked up her story. The host, a woman named Aria Neves, reached out with sensitivity and precision. I think people need to hear this, Aria said. Not just because of what happened, but because you fought back when most people would have been drowned. Emily agreed to one interview. Just one. They met in a quiet studio, the lights soft, the tone somber. When the episode aired, it was titled The Mother and the $1 Million Lie. But it wasn't about money. It was about resilience. About betrayal. And about the strength it takes to grieve and survive in the same breath. The podcast went viral within 72 hours. Requests poured in: media, nonprofits, community leaders. But Emily kept her distance from the noise. She didn't want to become a symbol. She wanted to heal. One evening, as autumn crept into the edges of September, she held a small gathering in her apartment. Just Rachel, Dominic, Lena, and a couple of friends from the hospital who had quietly supported her through it all. They sat around a modest table, plates of food between them, stories shared over flickering candlelight. At one point, Dominic raised a glass. To Noah, he said simply. To the boy who reminded all of us why the truth matters. Emily smiled, the kind that ached but healed at the same time. To Noah, she echoed. And in that moment, it wasn't about the courtroom or the fund or the documents. It was about the memory of a child, the fight for what was right, and the woman who refused to let the silence swallow her. Long after everyone left, Emily stepped onto her small balcony. The night was clear. A few stars scattered across the sky. She looked up and whispered, I kept my promise. She had buried her son alone. But now, she carried his name with the weight and dignity it deserved. And no one, not her family, not their lawyers, not the liars, would ever take that from her again. She was free. She was whole. She was Noah's mother. And that was enough.